This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody. Billy Embody. 1, 2, 3, let me go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I am Billy Embody. Thanks for listening. And we are off to a big start on this Monday as we've got a newsy one for SMU fans. As there's a lot to catch up on over the weekend, and we'll get to all of that in just a moment. But first, I do want to remind you guys that we are presented by our friends at Thomas Auto Group. ThomasAutoGroup.com is where you can go and find information on new and pre-owned vehicles that you can buy and get employee pricing on when you mention ontheponyexpress.com. I've been to all their dealerships, and Brandon Thomas's group of employees will take care of you, and they are SMU owned. So Mustangs supporting Mustangs here on the Pony Express podcast, and really excited to continue our partnership with them. And I can tell you, they will take care of you, whether it's service, whether it's pre-owned, whether it's new car. They can do all of that for you when you head up 75 to McKinney and save with the Thomas Auto Group.
Shopping for a new car, truck, or SUV? Look no further than the Thomas Auto Group. Browse our selection of over 2,000 vehicles from 3 great brands.
Watch this!
All online and in a few simple steps. Just click on the vehicle you want, save big on the most popular brands, and drive away happy. Plus, all vehicles sold are backed by the Thomas Promise. Visit our website, thomasautogroup.com, or shop in-store at the Thomas Auto Group in McKinney, home of the Thomas Promise.
Indeed. So, with that, we've now gotten into the portion of the podcast where we'll bring you the latest on SMU, and head over to ontheponyexpress.com for more of that. $1 for your first week, 50% off annual, so your first year on the site. So, with that, we will break down more of SMU Boston College with Hayden Howerton later this week. As soon as the college football playoff rankings drop, we'll record our podcast, react to that, and also break down the SMU BC game. But SMU did beat Boston College 38-21. The Mustangs were able to score late to stretch that lead to 10 points. But this is one that I was definitely wrong on in terms of the prediction, as the score was not 52-13, but credit to Boston College. They came out and they really hung around with SMU, and their game plan was one that took advantage of grinding it out. They were able to run the football. But let's kind of pull back here a minute and go back to the beginning of the game. SMU goes right down the field. Colin Rogers, who there was a chance he wasn't going to play, actually kind of tweaked a hamstring, and he misses the first field goal to open things up. And watching the game, I was at a wedding this weekend, and so was able to watch kind of first quarter and then fourth quarter, and then really watched it all again a couple times now on Sunday and Monday. But that was kind of that moment where you're like, okay, might be one of those days where SMU is going to have to keep fending away a Boston College team that really hung around for the entirety of this ball game. And at the same time, SMU was able to kind of do what they wanted offensively. I felt like they had times in the fourth quarter that obviously they stalled out. They punted twice. They weren't able to finish off the game when it came to the 2-minute drill or the 4-minute drill or so when they got the ball back with 5:54. But they still took almost 2 minutes off the clock to kind of cap that game. And I think for me, watching this game really showed, I think, that Boston College has one of, if not the best offensive lines that SMU's faced all season. Being able to rush for 180 yards on this defense is uber impressive. It was kind of tough sledding at times for SMU's run game, but they still hit that 30 carry mark that we talk about. Brashard Smith, 18 carries, 120 yards, 6.7 yards per carry. Of course, that was kind of helped by his 45-yard run that he had, but they just stuck with it. And at the same time, Kevin Jennings, 24 of 35, 298 yards, 3 touchdowns, and interception. But I felt like overall, because the two teams stayed committed to running the football, you had BC rush it 43 times for 180 yards. They just stayed committed to that and were able to kind of just find a way to extend drives at critical moments. You know, you look at their 6 of 15 on third downs, but they're 3 of 6 on fourth downs. I just felt like, especially in the first half, when BC was able to go on that 14-point run in the second quarter, SMU wasn't playing bad on defense. They just Boston College made plays in critical moments. You look at I think it was the 3rd and 20 that they converted, and that might have been the play that they scored on to open up their scoring and get on the board. But it wasn't like they were dominant drive after drive and kind of taking it to them or play after play. They made plays when they needed to find a way to extend their drive. You look at the 4th and 5 play in the second quarter as Boston College was able to extend that drive and get their first touchdown of the game from Kai Robichaux, who had another solid game. That was a play where, you know, just kind of found the soft spot in the zone. They were able to get a pass interference call on Speedy Nettles that was called. And that was just a play where I kind of felt like it was ticky-tack. And there were times where SMU could have been off the field, and they weren't able to do that. And Rhett kind of talked about this in his post-game press conference, where they kept extending the lead at a couple times to 10 points, and then they could never get that 3-score game and really open it up and force BC out of their game plan, which was clearly to run the football. But you look at the 2nd and 20 play, that's what it was, where they were able to make it 17-14 SMU, where Grayson James, or actually it was the 2nd and 20 from the SMU 20 that they completed I'm reading this wrong there it is. The 3rd and 20 from the SMU 41 that they were able to pick up 32 yards to Reed Harris. That was the play that when I was watching the game back and you had seen a couple of conversions already, I was like, man, that's one, not like an SMU defense. And when you saw SMU late in the game turn it up defensively and get pressure on Grayson James when he needed to throw the ball, they got stops, they got sacks. And so it was just one of those things where I felt like early in the game, and in particular that second quarter, they were not able to get off the field and force those turnover on downs like they did in the first quarter, or a 3-and-out to open up the game, because SMU went right down the field and just missed a field goal, and which is rare for Colin Rogers, but there was a bad snap involved and they weren't able to get it down and convert. So very different game if you're looking at it from, wow, they just drove the length of the field, scored 3 points, defense gets off the field in the 3-and-out. You never know how that might affect SMU's momentum in that sense. And because of that, they were kind of locked in an absolute war for 4 quarters. And, you know, Boston College, a team highly motivated, coming off a win against Syracuse, they showed that maybe it wasn't necessarily a fluky kind of surprise win, and, you know, made me look a little bit like, you know, didn't respect BC enough, that's for sure. But I just looked at the overall body of work, and this is a BC team that had lost 3 straight before that Syracuse game. They found a way. Syracuse had gotten knocked down a peg by Pitt. Maybe there was something to that, and that was why they continued their losing ways. But, you know, for BC, you've got to give them credit. They played a relatively clean game for the most part, outside of the interception where they really had a chance to take the lead on SMU going into the half with that interception that you know, Kevin Jennings got hit on. Just one of those plays where Rhett Lashley even kind of took the blame on that one, where he said, I put them in a bad position calling that play. But you look at what SMU was able to do overall, I felt like it's not a game that really concerned me as much as it was BC came out with a game plan that they were able to stick to. Like, at watching that game, even when SMU was up 31-28 late in the game, it felt like they had enough control of it where you would really need some heroics from BC. And their passing game, not necessarily the most consistent thing. I mean, Grayson James, credit to him, over 200 yards passing, but still 56% completion percentage on the day, 18 times 32 attempts. Wasn't a banner day in that regard from him, but they made plays throughout that game in particular moments that kept it close. So it's really one of those weird games to judge. You didn't have Elijah Roberts for SMU, which I felt like impacted SMU's ability to stop the run, which I thought SMU's defensive line probably not their best performance, just giving up 180 yards on the ground. But in terms of rushing the passer, I felt like they got enough pressure on Grayson James. There were times where he missed open receivers. You look on that opening drive, they were able to kind of force one. They were able to late really tee off on him and obviously close out the game with, I think, 3 sacks on BC's last 4 plays. But I didn't think that I feel like they just had this willingness to run the football on SMU, and it was able to pay off because it was a close game. And so SMU's offense wasn't their perfect, most perfect game by any means. I felt like there were some situational things that they kind of, mishandled at times. And of course, there were some penalties here and there that cost SMU as well. But I don't know. It was just one of those weird games. Somebody said it on the board as I was kind of monitoring the game thread. It just seemed like there was no flow to it. And I know this is the beginning of the game, but sometimes that first drive missed field goal is kind of one of those things where you're like, okay, all right, maybe it is a game that SMU is kind of in for one. But this team has that resolve. They have that ability to make plays when it matters. And there's a necessary grit and drive to overtake an opponent when some of those things come up. Like when there's adversity being faced, they have that ability to step up. And I think that's something that needs to be recognized a little bit with this team in terms of, when we're watching games, there's not been a time BC led for a few minutes of game time. That was the first time that SMU trailed, I think, since the BYU game or somebody tweeted it. The amount of dominance SMU's gone through in ACC play needs to be remembered, in my opinion. And there's been different moments where, Duke game, Louisville in that third quarter. But for the most part, this team has found a way, and they've been able to show why they're atop the ACC standings. They've found a way. And when you're going on a championship run, and we saw this last year, I think this Boston College SMU game really reminded me a lot of the Memphis game. SMU was able to close that one out late and just, push Memphis off to the side. This was kind of another slaying the dragon game. I know SMU hasn't lost however many times in a row to Boston College, but SMU had lost at Memphis a lot of times in a row. It'd been a while since they won up there. To get over kind of that mental hump, I guess, from the Fenway Bowl game, SMU had to get this one done, and they did. And I didn't really doubt that they would from any moment of it. I just think there's a calmness about this team. And Rhett Lashley talked about that in his post-game press conference in terms of their expectations for themselves. And that's what happens when you have 26 seniors on a team. So was not perfect, a lot to clean up, I think, in terms of just general, maybe filling gaps on defense. I think the offensive line, maybe consistency wise, they had to, deal with Donovan Ezeraku, who really was impressive once again, a really impressive player for BC, but he was held without a sack at the same time. They did not give up a sack for Boston College, which is really impressive. Kevin Jennings made some incredible plays to extend plays, get out of trouble. And outside of that one interception where he got hit, SMU was able to take care of the football. But when you look at how much BC was able to control the clock, it just wore down this defense a little bit. And I kind of think you go back to that first drive, and not to harp on it, but when you don't come away with points, and that was probably one of the first drives at home this year, maybe that SMU hadn't come away with points since BYU. They were kind of not, they weren't chasing it because they were ahead, but they weren't able to play from ahead in a sense of power the entire game. And I think that's what allowed BC to kind of stick with their game plan. So you get through it, you move on. SMU was able to get the job done. So kudos to this SMU staff and players for getting it done and improving on their unbeaten record in ACC play. They're now 6-0 in league play. That's the first time in program history that SMU has been 6-0 in league play in back-to-back seasons. First time in SMU history. So pretty wild stuff there, just stats-wise. But do you want to get into a few recruiting notes about who was on campus this weekend and also touch on basketball? But before we do that, I got to remind you guys that we are presented by Mizzen and Main as well. I'm wearing this polo. Again, it's one of my favorite ones. Everything from Mizzen just breathes the right way. And this one is the Versa Stripe Polo. This is an incredible buy. And if you go to mizzenandmain.com, you can get 15 to 20%. They'll hit you with different offers off of their products. The college ones, you can't get that offer because of licensing, but it is still incredible stuff. I would order it now for your favorite Mustang to get here in time for the holidays. It does take just a little bit longer because it is that custom embroidered logo that you would want. But they do have quite the stock of SMU attire. I was at a wedding this weekend and I wore that dress shirt, if you're watching on YouTube, underneath my blazer. Got a lot of compliments. A couple people even said, that's Mizzen right there. I have the regular one. I said, oh yeah, they're starting a college collections now. So if you have other fans of other colleges, they are coming in hot with the collegiate collection. It's pricey stuff, but it lasts. It's just incredibly well done. And it is a SMU started company over there. So they've taken great care of me. All their stuff is high quality and they just bring it with everything that they do. So I highly encourage you to go check them out. Their collegiate collection is incredible, but you can also just go to their website. And when you give them your email, you're going to be able to save 15 to 20% off. And also Black Friday is coming up. They will have a sale, but you can see they're expanding into other markets already. So take advantage of it with family and friends and hook them up with honestly some of the best clothing that is around and out there. I mean, this is really high quality stuff. So appreciate Mizzen and Main for jumping on with On the Pony Express and being a sponsor for us. So we've got a few recruiting notes. Some big names were on campus for SMU over the weekend. This was one of the best recruiting lists I've seen for SMU and when it comes to underclassmen. And they had multiple 4-star prospects on campus. And we'll run down a few of them. You could go back to the On the Pony Express website, ontheponyexpress.com, and get the full rundown of those prospects who were on campus. And we're going to run down some of them right now. And I got to lead off with a guy who was sporting an SMU pullover and has been a long-time target for the Mustangs as well, and committed to an SEC program in Texas A&M. And that's Markel Ford right there from Mesquite Horn. He's in the class of 2026. He is one of the best safeties in the country. Really, I think is somebody that could develop kind of into like an Isaiah Wacobia. He's got that size. He's got that strength and that physicality. And I think he could be somebody to really keep a close eye on when it comes to the long process that a lot of these guys will go through in terms of, making visits, going through their processes, being committed early on. And he's now kind of been around SMU a number of times over the past, year or so. And so you've got to give the staff a good bit of credit for not giving up here. They're not giving up on his teammate, 5-star offensive lineman Lamont Rogers, who I think is one of the best prospects in the country, was named a 5-star by On3 in the updated rankings, and will continue to be a guy that SMU tries for down the stretch in terms of the flip process to see if they can pull it off from Missouri. He's committed to Missouri, but Texas A&M and SMU are kind of the two teams that are surging there with him. So you've got to just continue to recruit these guys. In the day of the portal, this is why you keep recruiting them, is because you never know what will happen. And another prospect that I think you kind of share that idea with is DeQuivis Beck out of Carthage, four-star linebacker for one of the best programs in the state of Texas. You see, obviously, Texas, they do have a strong foothold there at Carthage, but Beck is a four-star linebacker, top 150 prospect on the On3 industry ranking. When you look at what SMU has been able to do, getting a guy like Moochie Dixon out of Carthage, there's a lot of Carthage people that take a ton of pride in that program over there for the Bulldogs, what they've been able to build there, over the course of their history in Texas high school football. It's just really impressive. And to get a guy like him on campus just continues to speak to the I think notoriety of what SMU being in the ACC means. And you just will continue to push on guys like that, as well as a guy that SMU is now what I would say loosely in the top 3 with. And they're battling Oklahoma. They're battling Texas from what he told me. We've got his full reaction at ontheponyexpress.com. Again, just $1 for your first week. But Noah Best was on campus. He's out of Midlothian, 4-star offensive lineman, top 40 interior offensive lineman in the country, and a guy that has been to Oklahoma numerous times. So keeping an eye on them there as well. But they're really making a good impression, led by Garen Justice there. And so we've got his full reaction at ontheponyexpress.com in terms of what he thought about the visit and all of those things. But they continue to really target a lot of guys in the trenches in this 2026 class, and a guy who's been to SMU a bunch. And I've been doing this now, covering recruiting for over 10 years now, which, certainly ages me, but they say, watch what they do, not what they say. And I think this is a prime example. I think Zayden Crimpin is a huge priority for this SMU staff. I think they've done an awesome job of recruiting him, making him feel like he is a massive priority, and he is. And he was once again on SMU's campus this weekend, getting a look at the program up close and personal. He was at a game earlier this season, might have been at 2, or now might have been at 3, but he got a chance to spend a lot of time with Garen Justice, and he had a lot of good things to say about it. And I think it's one of those things where you're going against, and I love the Twitter brigade out there with the blue blood SMU commentary, but when you're a kid who grows up in the state of Texas, or you have teammates committed elsewhere, Texas and Texas A&M are 2 really difficult programs to turn down. So I'm most interested to see, maybe out of the entire 2026 class, how this recruitment goes for SMU, because they've invested a lot of time here, as they have with some other prospects. Don't get me wrong, but he's been on campus so much. He's been on campus, from my records, 9 times alone. And when you do that, and you've spent that much time on a campus, it's worth noting that, it's not something to scoff at when you try and evaluate a program's chances to land a prospect. So Zayden Crimpin, he always has good things to say about the program as well. So worth noting that SMU had him back there on campus. We've got full reactions from these recruits at ontheponyexpress.com. So again, sign up today. Jamarian Carlton is a guy that for a minute there, it looked like SMU's maybe fading with, and I still think he'll be somebody that's maybe a difficult pull in a sense, but they did get him back on campus, and he's kind of quiet. He doesn't necessarily say too much, and he's been on some visits. He's been to Texas A&M. He's been to Texas. He dropped his top 10 earlier in October and didn't have SMU in it. He included Baylor, Kansas State, LSU, Nebraska, Ohio State, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, and Southern Cal. He's a guy that Calvin Thibodeau has been on for a long, long time, and I think SMU just continuing to push and show what a priority he is got him back on campus, which is a big deal for SMU. You just keep recruiting some of these guys because, again, you never know. You never know what's going to happen, and he's a good one. He looks the part. I can tell you that much. Big, strong guy who could play on the edge, kind of Elijah Roberts-esque is what he reminds me of as far as where he's probably headed from a body perspective. So those are some of the guys that I wanted to highlight on the recruiting front. And of course, I do want to mention that Jermecco Chunky Green, the Conroe running back who's committed to SMU, well, he's now a 4-star on three sports. On three national scout Cody Belair called him a dude. He's averaging over 9 yards a carry this year. He's got 21 touchdowns on the year. He reminds me a good bit of Xavier Jones coming out of high school, another Houston area running back. And I know there are some sources around the program that feel the same, that's kind of a good comp there for him. And of course, Xavier went on to set the SMU record in rushing touchdowns at one point for SMU in a season with 25, and the overall season touchdowns of 25. So I think he's that's kind of the comp that you look at, and he's a strong running back. I think he's going to factor in early. Well, he's now a top 25 running back in the country, now the 50th overall prospect in the state of Texas. We'll see. There's still time in the final rankings where he could end up being in the on 300, which would be big as well. So SMU knocking on the door of a top 25 class. They probably need a really high-end prospect to flip to them down the stretch here. But to have another 4-star on board with Ty Hawkins at quarterback, Jermod Odoms at offensive tackle, and Jalen Cooper at wide receiver, it's a good time to be the SMU offensive staff kind of reloading there. And I do like their defensive class as well, with some of the guys that they have in there. And Jalen Shivers was back on campus, big defensive end from the state of Georgia, and Chinedu Onyeagoro, the edge out of California, was on campus as well. So some guys from out of state taking the time to get back on campus just ahead of the early signing period, which is in the first week of December this year. So big reminder there. First week of December is the early signing period right before conference championship games. And then early signing period, then transfer portal window opens December 9th. So talk about a fun month of December at ontheponyexpress.com. So make sure you join us. SMU basketball, while they did lose to Butler on Friday night, they did get a big recruiting win. Another 4-star prospect committing to the Mustangs on Thursday. So want to, of course, talk about that a little bit. BJ Davis-Ray, he was a 4-star when he committed. On 3 has not updated their rankings, so someone else updated, and he did drop down to a 3-star. On 3's always had him as a 3-star. But one of those things where big wing, he's been to a bunch of high schools at this point, but I think he's really probably a little underrated just from the standpoint of he's going to be able to fit in athletically and size-wise in the ACC. I think if Andy Enfield and this staff opted to go ahead and take him, they really liked what he brought to the table for them. They want to add size out there on the wing. They've got Jermaine O'Neal Jr., who's got some size as well, and then they have 2 bigs in the front court. So I did break down what's next for SMU basketball when it comes to recruiting, so check that out on theponyexpress.com as well. But BJ Davis-Ray had offers from Arkansas, Kansas, just really highly touted early on, as in particular in his high school career. And SMU and St. Louis were, among the programs in the end, kind of battling it out for him. But I think he's somebody to keep an eye on as maybe someone who, really peaked early in high school and kind of rode that and ended up finding his home at SMU. But I see this in football, I see this in basketball. Sometimes guys end up so highly touted early that they kind of think that, and I think in basketball culture to an extent, this is probably where people around kids need to help them more in terms of keeping their head down and not worrying about things. But sometimes you can just know that you're going to land somewhere at a college and you're going to maybe go high major, and just at the last minute, it doesn't end up being the case. He ends up going high major at SMU, but now he can put his head down, go back to work, and still be a very good player for SMU if he puts his head down and works. And he's joining now a signing class of 3 players. He is committed. BJ Davis-Ray is. He hasn't been announced as a signee yet, but SMU did announce their 4-star signees, Jermaine O'Neal Jr., as well as teammate at Dynamic Prep, Jaden Toombs, 2 of the best players in the country in the class of 2025. And also Nigel Walls out of the Houston area, who was before BJ Davis-Ray, their latest committing about a week prior than BJ Davis-Ray, top 100 prospect there in the 6'10" big man. He's oozing with athleticism. He's got a chance to be a really good player for SMU. So wanted to highlight the basketball staff getting it done. They have the highest ranked recruiting class in SMU history now, in the top 10 on some networks. They're just outside of it on On3. So now we'll see if they pull another highly touted player in the spring signing period. I've got more information on that at ontheponyexpress.com, or if they go all portal. So we'll be keeping an eye on it at ontheponyexpress.com. Again, head over to thomasautogroup.com, check out all their inventory, and head up 75 to McKinney, whether it be Ford, Subaru, Volkswagen. They'll take care of you. Great people up there at Thomas Auto Group. And keep an eye on all those Mizzen and Main shirts, and go ahead and treat yourself or treat some family or some friends to their collegiate collection for Christmas. So we'll have a lot more at ontheponyexpress.com. We've got QB Chronicles that dropped today on the podcast front. And also we introduced the Pony Hoops Insight podcast with Dre Foster, Nick Moore, and Sean Williams. Really excited about that one. 3 SMU greats that I covered, which makes me feel old, now breaking into the podcast realm to talk SMU basketball every week. So hope you guys enjoyed this pod and appreciate you guys listening. And we will catch you guys next time on another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMU On3 and on Instagram at On3SMU. And keep it locked to ontheponyexpress.com for more coverage.